Good evening and welcome to the Cover 1 Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and we are here tonight to bring you a slightly different type of show. Not so different that it'll tune people out of here quickly, but I think it's a little different, and the reason we're doing it is if you are someone who enjoys other NFL-related podcasts you've probably heard of, if not been a listener of, the Around the NFL podcast, which was a show that ran for 11 years as part of the NFL media's podcasting arm, and it has now been canceled, which is unfortunate. They are now shifting towards a daily show, which all of that just sort of reeks of corporate over meddling, where they just are trying to chase a trend rather than just staying with what is clearly a successful concept. But hey, that's just one person's opinion, you know. Who am I to argue with an industry that made over $13 billion last year? Yeah, so be it. So our show tonight will be going around the NFL. We will be posing each other questions and answering those questions as quickly as possible, preferably within 2 minutes, so that we are not here for hours and hours and hours and bleeding into the air raid hours time. Before we get started with anything else, though, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I love the intro. The corporate greed within the NFL is a constant topic on my mind, at least. And when you see something like this happen to this podcast, it just reminds me of things like ESPN getting rid of basically all of their good talent in favor of just talent nobody cares about for whatever reason. They pretend like we care about that. All of this like high level media or national sports media is such a disaster right now. I don't understand the strategy at all, and I don't understand how it's going to work. This is just another silly example of that.
It's unfortunate. The real unfortunate part is the writing seemed to be on the wall, at least a little bit, for a while. But it kind of felt like maybe they would just push through that or whatever, but clearly they didn't feel the same way. So it's unfortunate to see a show that had that long of a run come to an end, but you know, they will probably move on. They will find a way, and they're all, you know, popular enough people where they'll land on their feet with something, I'm sure. Former disgraced co-host of the show, Kyle Salagi, says, in favor of Pat McAfee. You know, I can't remember who said it, but I'll never forget someone, I think it was on Twitter too, who said, the Pat McAfee show is for people who want to like Barstool, but don't actually want to consume Barstool content. And I'm like, that's so accurate. That's such an accurate way of putting that. Yeah. It's too bad. It's the current state of sports media, and this is why you should be supporting your favorite local. I can't. Are we local? Is Cover 1 local? Like, we cover one team essentially. I mean, we're not like exclusive. It's not like we don't talk about other teams, but it's also like there's only so many of us that live in Buffalo, right? So it's hard to call us local coverage, but you know, support independent creators. Let's go with that.
That's a good one. Yeah, independent. Because you're right. Like, I mean, neither of us live in Buffalo, so technically we're not local to the team. But obviously, we speak on the Bills basically every single episode for longer than we do other teams.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get too far into this, speaking of corporate meddling, folks, we have our wonderful sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. They don't meddle with us. In fact, you can meddle with the system by joining Underdog Fantasy and using their site, because if that one home league for your fantasy needs just isn't enough for you, Go to Underdog Fantasy. It's all the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your team, all the chances to win big, and none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. We are also brought to you by you, the lovely folks who sponsor us through Cover One Pass. We appreciate every single one of our One Pass subscribers. It's $60 a year. If you break that down, that is $5 a month, which is absolutely crazy. I don't think there's really any other subscription-based thing that is $5 a month. Maybe like Quibi was at one point, but they're dead now, so who's to say? Quibi is dead, but Cover One is not. That's going to be the new tagline of this show. And for $5 a month, you can sign up for Cover One Pass, get all the best content regarding the Bills and even some other NFL-related stuff. It's the best content we can put out there. It's a group of great guys, all bringing different angles, all different shows, exclusive content. We have Greg Thompson's series on breaking down the salary cap, which is a very complicated system, and he does a great job with talking about it. And probably the best part of this really is the now Discord channel. We used to be on Slack, we're now on Discord. I think Discord is better. It's also really weird being on Discord now with this, because I used to just sort of ignore Discord because I'm a part of all these different channels, and now this is just part of it. I'm like, well, I can't really ignore that, and that, it's weird, but it's also good. It's better. Discord is better than Slack. I was able to get rid of Slack, which is nice.
For sure.
I never used Slack for anything. Plus Slack had no like data cache, right? Like it would delete messages after a certain time. It's just like, okay, well, that's not fun. Anyway, so now that we're on Discord, we can all live forever together in perpetuity as the Cover One Pass family. You get to interact with your favorite creators at Cover One, along with a group of people who are just as passionate about the Bills and just passionate about other things in life as well. I mean, we got all sorts of channels like video games, movies, food, politics, if you really like that sort of thing during an election year. Golf, if that's something that doesn't bore you to tears. There's all sorts of stuff on there. And for $60 a year, you get to support us and independent sports content creators. Sign up today and help us out. It's always a great help. So we appreciate all of you who are supporters of Cover One Pass. Franco Futatini. Okay. The McAfee show reminds me of how my friends and I talk about sports at Roundup Bonfire. That's why I like it. Better than Stephen A. Smith. It's like drying off after a shower with sandpaper. It's such a fascinating analogy. Drying off with sandpaper. It almost sounds like there's a story behind that. And if there is, I would love to hear it. But no, I mean, I understand the appeal. I shouldn't say that I don't understand the appeal. I understand the appeal of the Pat McAfee show. I just think that using that as sort of like one of your flagship shows, as opposed to just sort of a niche thing, is a little odd. Obviously it's a popular show. Not saying it's not, but it's a little odd.
The thing that frustrates me, like about Stephen A. Smith in particular, is I do truly believe he is intelligent enough to promote really good sports takes, but he's so ingrained in this new culture of national media where it's just hot take for clicks. Like that's all they do now, to a point that is so extreme, it's so obvious that it's frustrating.
So I hear where you're coming at with that. I would argue that Stephen A. Smith has always been like that, including back when he was in college, when he was on his college basketball team and working for the school newspaper, and he wrote a column in the school newspaper saying that his own basketball coach should resign.
I did not know that. Okay, I take back what I said previously. Oh my God.
It was, when I saw that, I was like, that is one of the most Stephen A. Smith things to possibly do. And honestly, kind of respect him for it. It's wild. It's not something anyone should ever do. But yeah, it takes a little guts to do something like that. So shout out to young Stephen A. Smith for calling for his own coach's resignation in the school's official newspaper. A good amount of kudos to you. But Joe DeRosa of Cover One Under review on Tuesday nights. Roundup turned my frown up. That's gonna be tagline number 2 of the show. We're less than 10 minutes into the show, and we've already got 2 new taglines for this show. I love it. Walter S. says, same information as the regular ESPN shows, just delivered in a different manner with Pat McAfee. Sure. Sure. All right. We are not here to talk about Pat McAfee, believe it or not. We are here to talk about the NFL. So, what we are going to do and how we're going to be doing this, if I am going to be remembering this correctly, which I probably should, because I don't think my memory has gotten that bad at this point. So, I, or you, depending on how we do this, will ask the other a question. We will answer it. And then, or the others will answer it, rather. Mm-hmm. Person A asks person B answers it, then person B asks person A, and person A answers it. And we're going to move through the entire NFL league. We're going to go through all 32 teams, 2 questions each team. We will try to keep this as reasonably timed as possible, because we don't want to spill into the air raid hour, which comes on at 9 o'clock. But we'll see how this goes. We may have to speed through some teams depending on if we go overtime on some of these other teams. We will try to keep it to 2 minutes apiece. I will keep track with this, which is probably not going to be super reliable. So just a heads up with that.
And to be clear,
yeah,
we have no idea what each other's questions are.
Yeah,
we haven't talked about this at all.
No, we haven't. We came up with this. We came up with this concept yesterday. When the Around the NFL podcast got canceled, I was like, kind of want to do something for that now. So that's where we're at, and that's kind of how this show has always been, just sort of flying by the seat of our pants and having fun with it. Kyle Slaggy is the master of that, in my opinion, and glad to have him in the comments. All right, so I don't know about you, but I feel like we should start with a layup, and we should start with our favorite team, which is the Buffalo Bills. So, do you want to ask a question first? Do you want to lead us off?
I can lead us off.
All right, lead us off.
Okay.
We're gonna start the clock right now.
Did Stephon Diggs make Josh Allen?
No, and I understand the feeling that people have when it comes to Diggs being in that season where Josh Allen just took off in 2020, right? Like that makes sense, right? He was a alpha number 1 receiver at that point in his career, and he went to Josh Allen, who in the year before with Cole Beasley and John Brown showed, like, if you just give him guys, he's going to give him opportunities, right? John Brown had a career year the year before with Josh Allen, and so giving him Stephon Diggs just made sense that Diggs would also perform well. But Allen is more than Diggs. Diggs is more than Allen. I think both will succeed without each other now. Diggs, is probably not going to be the primary target in Houston. There's plenty of guys there, but I do think that both will be great outside of each other. Uber, do you feel truly that Terrell Bernard is going to be an All-Pro this year?
I don't think he'll be an All-Pro this year. I don't think he has enough, weight he's held in the NFL where I think he can't beat out a player like Roquan Smith, even if statistically he is better. And last year, statistically, he was as good as Roquan Smith. He just simply got no All-Pro votes because people don't know who he exists. And if the All-Pro team has proven anything to us, whether it be All-Pro, whether it be the MVP, whether it be a bunch of these other awards, the AP has literally no idea what they're doing when it comes to voting for these players. I do think the one thing I'll say about Terrell Bernard, I think he's going to have a better season than Matt Milano. And this is coming from somebody who absolutely adores Matt Milano. Thinks Matt Milano is an absolute stud. But I think Bernard, with all the experience he gained last year, comes into the season even better than he was last year with Milano next to him. I think you're going to see a special season for Bernard. I don't think he's getting an All-Pro award.
That's fair. Real quick comment from Lauren. Allen and Diggs furthered each other's careers. One isn't responsible for making the other. I agree. Both reached great heights with each other, and that's what great players should do with each other. Mike Mallon Guitar says, what a surprise Bernard was. I agree. Keon's Jockey, we'll call this a bonus question. Is McDermott on the hot seat with anything less than a Super Bowl win? I don't think so. I think if it took as long as it did for Terry Pagula to fire whoever was the Sabres coach for doing nothing in a league where it's very hard to not make the playoffs, right? It's hard to not make the NHL playoffs. In the NFL, it's hard to make the playoffs. I doubt that he'll fire McDermott at this point.
They just extended him last year too, and unless they miss the playoffs in spectacular, like they go 6-11, he might get fired. But maybe. I don't think it's anything less than a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
fires him.
Yeah, Joe DeRosa coming in hot with the drop the damn like for these distinguished gentlemen. Thank you. I don't know who these distinguished gentlemen are, but if they would like to come on our show, they can feel free to do so. And also leave a like as well. So thank you. Leave a like on your way in, and if you haven't, leave a like on your way out. So we are going to move on to the Miami Dolphins. Do you want to take this one first?
You go first. You go first.
Okay. So in 2023, Tua had a career year. Played all 17 games, and led the league in passing yards. If the Dolphins give Tua a new contract, will it tank their franchise forever? Or for like the foreseeable future, not like forever.
Yeah, I think that they're already between a rock and a hard place right now with the contracts they've given out to players like Bradley Chubb, and even Tyreek Hill's contract. Next year, he could reasonably be on the Dolphins. The following year, he can't be. He has over a $50 million cap hit. I don't know how they pay Tua, and Tua seemingly is saying, you're going to pay me market value or I'm not going to sign a contract with you. I don't know where Tua will go if he doesn't sign a contract with Miami next year. But yeah, if they sign Tua to a massive extension, I don't know how they're going to be able to play the cap gymnastics they need to re-sign players like Javon Holland, like Jalen Phillips, like Jalen Waddle. Like they just have too many young superstars that they need to pay before they can pay Tua.
I think that's fair.
Miami Dolphins. What do you think we'll see from Jordan Poyer this year in Miami?
You know, it's interesting because they already have a great safety in Javon Holland, right? Who I think is genuinely like what in an era where everyone's trying to come up with like, oh, this is an underrated player in the NFL. No one talks about this guy or whatever. And a lot of those are players that people know. They just don't like but because they're not like upper echelon type of guys, they don't get as much attention, but people like know them. Javon Holland is somebody who is a genuinely great player who is not getting enough attention. And Jordan Poyer, I mean, the thing that works with this is the fact that both have the ability to play like they did, like Poyer did in Buffalo with Hyde, at different areas of the field. But I think Poyer will probably be better served in the box. But at this point, at his age, I don't know how much of an impact he's going to have. And more than that, especially when you're breaking in a new defense under Anthony Weaver, you have your primary two pass rushers in Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips rehabbing respective injuries. That's tough.
Yeah. All right, you want to bop to the Jets now?
We'll bop our way to the top. We'll bop to the top with the Jets. Setting aside injuries, how do the Jets not make the playoffs?
Setting aside injuries, how did the Jets not make the playoffs? Oh man, it's age catches up to them. That's the only way that they don't make the playoffs if no one gets hurt on this team.
I think my internet is being banned.
Oh, I can see your video. It's just slow, but I can hear you.
See? Oh, okay, that's fair. All right, so we're gonna reset the clock on that. All right, just to reemphasize and just to make sure my question came across correctly across the airwaves. Setting aside injuries, how do the Jets not make the playoffs?
Yeah, it's age catching up to them. That's the only conceivable way a team with that much talent can't make the playoffs if they are relatively healthy this season. And even if age does catch up to them, I still think they have enough talent to make the playoffs. But if Aaron Rodgers is an absolute disaster, say he falls off the cliff like quarterbacks his age do, I don't know how much they can recover from that, because I don't think that they're going to have the cojones to put Tyrod Taylor in over Aaron Rodgers, even though Taylor possibly could be a better option if Rodgers truly falls off that cliff. On top of that, you're looking at players like Tyron Smith, who's playing left tackle for them, and Morgan Moses at right tackle, both aged players. If both of them drop off a cliff as well, you're going to have a massive issue on both the blind side and the strong side for whatever quarterback's behind that line of scrimmage. And then that'll just snowball into this giant issue where that offense simply can't play well enough. And if that offense can't play well enough, you could see a disgruntled defense, and then boom, the whole thing falls apart. So that's the only way I see them not making the playoffs if they stay healthy.
I think that's fair.
My question for you, Garrett Wilson or Breece Hall, who has the better season?
Ooh. Oh, this is a good question. God. I'm going to go with Breece Hall. And I think Aaron Rodgers is a part of this, because I think it's easy to say that, like, Garrett Wilson will have a great year with Aaron Rodgers, assuming Aaron Rodgers is, like, anywhere close to an Aaron Rodgers that we've seen in the recent past. Even that, like, 2022 version of Rodgers, which wasn't, like, elite level, right, is still good enough to give Garrett Wilson, like, a career type of year, right? Like, Garrett Wilson is that type of guy. But Breece Hall, I don't think, has ever had the opportunity to work on an offense where the passing game was an actual threat. And he's still been successful as a running back in spite of that. Adding guys like Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses and John Simpson, right? Like, all these guys helped make this offensive line better, and they weren't, like, atrocious in terms of run blocking last year. Actually, no, that's not true. They were bad at run blocking last year. They were just bad in general. Breece Hall was still able to create in spite of that. So I think that Breece Hall is going to have a year that will be difficult to match. Keon's Jacket Jockey says Aaron Rodgers nuts out. He becomes a sideshow Bob for the Jets. What a interesting way of phrasing that. Lauren says, I don't trust Aaron Rodgers to help that team get to the playoffs. I just don't. I don't trust the Jets. I just don't. That's fair. They are the Jets. So I don't think Jets fans trust the Jets at this point. Mike Malguitar says, do the Jets have a good roster outside of A-Rod? The defense definitely is, and even a good part of that offense, I would say, is pretty darn good. So, it's definitely the best Jets roster that I can remember in a long, long time. So, yeah, I think that they have a good roster. It's about outside of Aaron Rodgers. It's just that Aaron Rodgers is too important to this team for them to make the kind of run that they need to have. So, he has to be healthy. All right, we're going to move on to the New England Patriots. So do you feel that despite all the problems that the Patriots had, hang on. I apologize. I had to cough. That was disgusting. Nobody needed to hear that. In spite of all the issues they've had offensively over the last couple of years without Tom Brady, the Patriots defense with Belichick and company has still been very, very good. Even last year, that defense was very, very good. Yeah. Do you feel that with Gerard Mayo at the helm and a new staff and all that coming into place, do you feel like that defense will still be playing at a high level this year?
I have to believe that they won't be as good, even though I like the talent on this team. The reason is I truly believe that Bill Belichick is a mastermind when it comes to defensive football. And I don't know what Gerard Mayo is, but I'd be confident in saying that he's not as good as Bill Belichick was at that, because that would be insane to say. You can't compare a first-time head coach to arguably the GOAT. We could go on the whole different, show about whether he's the GOAT or not, but he was a damn good defensive-minded head coach for the Patriots. So, yeah, I don't see Gerard Mayo leading them in the same way, though I love Christian Gonzalez. I love Kyle Duggar. I love Christian Barmore. I love that Matt Judon's coming back. Like, they have talented players. I just don't know if they have the leadership in New England at this point to compete at the same level Bill Belichick led them to for years.
I think that's fair.
Kind of going on a little bit of the same tone here, but Gerard Mayo, one and done in New England or not?
No, I would be shocked if he was one and done. I mean, the only way where that would happen is if they were struggling to win like a game. Right, like if they were like a 2-15 type of team, and there were like off-season problems, and he lost the locker room or things like that. Like it would have to be a total and complete mess in order to, and they felt like he was like ruining Drake May as well. Yeah. Right, like there has to be a lot of bad things happening for him to be one and done. Especially because they made this succession plan. Nobody told them to do, Robert Kraft made him the head coach because he wanted Gerard Mayo to be the head coach. He didn't look at anybody else. Like he just said, hey, this is literally written into your contract. If Belichick leaves or he is no longer part of this franchise, you're the guy. And that to me says a lot. And some of that probably sounds like maybe they were just afraid of not having that sort of continuity, and kind of mucking up what the Patriots organization might look like and operate. And maybe that's true. But some of that I think is just purely because Gerard Mayo is a good coach who is younger and will bring fresh new ideas while still maintaining some of the core things. You're looking at the same comment I'm looking at, by the way. While still keeping the core principles that made the Patriots great over the last 20 or so years from Bill Belichick. The comment that we are both looking at is from Just the Tip of Canoe, who says, I prefer Mayo over Miracle Whip. You're not the only one. Lauren also says, I'm still bitter that the Patriots drafted Polk and Baker. You know what? Honestly, me too. Getting Jalen Polk in the second round was a good pick for them. Getting Javon Baker in the fourth round really stung. that really stung when that happened. But the Bills also ended up with Ray Davis in the fourth round. So, things even out. Things have a way of evening out. All right, that is it for the AFC East. I think we are actually making decent time. So we're going to keep going. And we're going to go into the AFC North. Yes, if that works. All right, so we're going to start with... honestly, we could start anywhere, but I'm going to start with your favorite team, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So never letting you live that takedown. Especially since you weren't wrong. They made the playoffs. Yeah. That's the worst part of it. Is that I can't bag you so much about it. It's just a ridiculous take that happened to be right. So, Pittsburgh Steelers. Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? Who's starting?
Did you say, sorry, I didn't catch that. Russell Wilson or Justin Fields will start? Is that the question?
Who is starting between the two?
It's Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson's actually a solid quarterback. I think he's probably, I don't know, in that 16 to 22 range of starting quarterbacks, let's say. He could be average. He could be slightly below average. I don't believe in Justin Fields. I've never believed in Justin Fields. In fact, it kind of goes to a debate I've been having on Twitter for the past, feels like a week, where people probably consider Justin Fields a dual threat quarterback. I do not think he's a dual threat quarterback. He's just a running quarterback. That's all he is. A la Michael Vick. But again, we won't go down that whole pipe because I know that that'd be a deeper discussion. But yeah, it's Russell Wilson. He's the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I kind of disagree, but that's just because I don't respect Russell Wilson as a player at this point in his career after last year being like babied off by an offense that asked him to do nothing. Yeah. All right, we'll go with that. What do you got for me?
All right. I'm gonna set the line at 8.5. Do the Steelers hit the over or the under?
Okay. So I don't know if this is cheating, but I'm gonna go through their schedule this year, and I'm gonna try and find. So you're setting the line at 8.5.
Yeah.
Okay. So in week 1 they play the Falcons in Atlanta. That is a game the Falcons should win. So I'm gonna call that a win for the Steelers. Week 2 at Denver, which is interesting. That is Russell Wilson's return home, sort of, if you want to call it that, where he basically got exiled. And, Denver's not in a good place. They might be 2-0. I'm going to call that 2-0. Chargers at Steelers. This feels like a weird game that they drop, so I'm going to say 2-1. Steelers at Colts, I'll call that 2-2. Cowboys at Steelers, I'll call that 2-3. Steelers at Raiders, I'll call that a win for the Steelers, so we're at 3-3. Jets at Steelers, we'll say for the Jets, we'll say that they're healthy, so we'll call that a 3-4 record for them right now. Giants at Steelers, ooh. That's tricky. That feels tricky.
How is that tricky? No way.
Listen, that Giants defense could be good. Defense could be good with Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. Like, that alone
going to score 3 points a game. They're going to be the worst offense in the NFL.
And you're going to tell me that the Steelers are going to score a bunch of points? All right, we'll go with 4-4. They beat the Giants in Pittsburgh. They play both New York teams back to back on prime time too. That's
New Jersey.
That's ridiculous. That's insane. Whose idea was that? That somebody needs to be fired. Steelers at Commanders, so they're at 4-4 now. Steelers at Commanders. I'm gonna call that a. Oh God, I don't even know what to do with the Commanders at this point. But I'm gonna. I guess I'll call that a Steelers win. We'll call that 5-4. Ravens at Steelers. I'll call that a Steelers win because they always find some way to bullshit their way to beat the Ravens at least once. So 6-4. Steelers at Browns. I'll call that a loss. We'll call that 6-5. Steelers at Bengals. Probably 6-6. Browns at Steelers. 6-7. Steelers at Eagles. Probably 6-8. Steelers at Ravens, probably 6-9. Oh, this is a bad collapse. Chiefs at Steelers, we'll call that 6-10, and Bengals at Steelers, we'll call that 7-10. So I'm going to take the under 8.5. We'll call it a 7-10 type of season, and this will be Mike Tomlin's first losing season as head coach. Oof. That's why I don't like predicting that. Just for the record, I know that's going to be. On the record, I know that's gonna come back and bite me, and they'll win some game that I predicted, if not multiple games. God, I don't like predicting that. I don't like it. And I know it's gonna be wrong. They went 5-1 in the division last year. Are you serious?
Yeah.
So part of that is taking advantage of Joe Burrow injuries, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They did beat the Steelers. Or the Steelers beat the Steelers. I mean, honestly, the Steelers probably did beat the Steelers more often than not. But they beat the Browns early on last year because Deshaun Watson was a train wreck. So they took advantage of that. God, And then they did beat the Ravens in that one game where the Ravens had like 6 or 7 drops from their receivers. God, that's brutal. Also, thank you, Kyle, for laughing at my Atlanta Falcons joke. Thank you. Someone has to appreciate my bad sense of humor. All right. So, yeah, I'm still going to take the under, even though I'm sure it'll end up being wrong somehow, which is annoying. It's just annoying. The Steelers always do this. Anyway, we're going to move on to a different team because we can't talk about how annoying the Steelers are forever. We'll move on to the Cincinnati Bengals. Do you feel that T. Higgins will be a Bengal throughout the entirety of 2024?
Ooh. Oh, boy. That is a damn good question. No, I don't think he is.
Ooh.
I think he gets
You think he gets traded?
Mid-season.
I've been thinking about this. I thought, is there a chance he gets traded mid-season to some team that's just trying to push their chips in the middle?
Yeah, well, here's the reason I think he gets traded mid-season. I don't think the Bengals make the playoffs, and I think they're out of the race pretty early. So that kind of goes to this, is they try to pick up a couple picks in moving T. Higgins, who essentially is going to refuse to re-sign with the Bengals after this season with all this contract animosity he has. Same with Trey. I mean, Trey Hendrickson's a bit older now, but there's all that animosity there. I'm sure there's some other players that are like, I want my money and I want it now. And the Bengals are essentially like, we gave all of it to Joe Burrow. We have no more to give to anybody else because their owner literally has no money to give to anybody else. I think T. Higgins gets traded mid-season, and that'd be a pretty good bold prediction for a bold prediction show if that ever happens. But
if someone ever wanted to do that,
yeah, true. That's a T. Higgins traded midseason.
I like that. I like that.
All right, I have two I could do, but I'll go with this one.
Okay.
Joe Burrow, does he receive any MVP votes this year? And by any, I'm not talking because I know that now you get 5 votes. Let's say he receive any first or second place MVP votes.
First or second?
Yes.
If he stays healthy, I think there's someone. I mean, it's a panel of like 50 people, right? Yeah. I think there's a reasonable chance that someone gives him at least 1 second place vote. At least one. I don't know what kind of season Joe Burrow's going to have. I don't know what kind of season the Bengals are going to have. They're a very mysterious team to me right now. I think it's possible that Joe Burrow returns to form. So, especially with Jamar Chase, right? Like, Jamar just brings so much as a receiver. I think it's possible that he receives a second place vote. I think it's a reasonable assumption to think that that's possible.
Sure.
But, yeah, it might not happen. I have no idea how this is gonna happen. They're a very odd team. They're in a weird place where they're still talented and they've got good players on this roster and good coaches, but there's a way where this falls apart kind of quickly and pretty ugly too. We're going to move on to the Cleveland Browns. Okay. So I'm going to go with the low-hanging fruit here. Is Deshaun Watson ever going to put it together for this team?
No, he's washed, man. Like he's so far it's wild how far he's come from his Houston days. He was so damn good in Houston, a perennial MVP candidate. That's how damn good he was. And then he had all the off-field nonsense, and the Browns said, give him all the money he wants. He comes to Cleveland, and he's not the same player, and he's completely different, and he just simply can't throw the ball. And then he also, when he's not fully healthy, he simply doesn't play. So I think the Browns are basically in a absolute downward spiral at this point, and they have there's nothing they can do. Deshaun Watson's cap hit each of the next 3 seasons is about $64 million. And at no point in the next 3 seasons does the dead cap drop below that. so they always will have a negative decade. They can't move on from him. You can't convince an ownership group that he should be a backup at that price point. So they're going to have to play him. It's going to be bad. It's going to be ugly, which I guess karma's a bitch, and that's what Watson's getting right now, is getting nationally embarrassed. But I do wonder if at some point a coach there will say, we got Jameis Winston, we got Tyler Huntley. One of those is better than Deshaun Watson. Does somebody have the ability to say, bench Deshaun? He's now the most expensive backup quarterback in the history of the NFL.
Jameis Winston in a tier of his own, if you will. Man, yeah, what a weird thing. And honestly, like, Deshaun Watson being where he is right now in his career, I think is the reason why they brought Ken Dorsey in as the offensive coordinator. Because they needed someone who might be able to figure something out with him. Because the other guys were all from that Shanahan type of tree, right? And I think Stefanski just said, I need to bring somebody else who might have some answers here. Anyway, what do you got for me?
Nick Chubb, is he still a top 5 running back after his injury? Or better way to say it, can you name 5 players, running backs that you would want?
That was going to be how I did this. So I would say Bijan Robinson with Atlanta. I would take him right now. Part of me wants to say Saquon Barkley, but he's kind of sort of in the same vein of Nick Chubb, where it's like, hey, if he stays healthy. But they're also very different players, right? Like, Nick Chubb is sort of like a running back's running back, where if you were to build a running back in a factory, like, that's sort of how you would build it. It would look more like Nick Chubb than it would, or at least it would play more like Nick Chubb than it would a Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley's just kind of doing his own thing, but he's also so athletic that it doesn't really matter. Man, now you got me thinking about running backs, and I don't really... Say that again?
CMC.
Oh, Christian McCaffrey, for sure. Those are definitely the top 2, Bijan and Christian McCaffrey. Breece Hall, as Kyle Salagi points out in our comments. Thank you. Breece Hall, yeah, I would probably put him above that. So that's 3. Man, I'm struggling here.
Jahmyr Gibbs?
Ooh. Potentially? Maybe? I'm not... I'd probably want to see what he's like this year, especially because like he's still going to be splitting stuff with David Montgomery, who I also like, not necessarily more than Nick Chubb, obviously, but yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I feel like there's just not a bunch of high level running backs where even with Nick Chubb being in a bad place injury-wise, we've seen him come back, and obviously that's also got to be taken into the equation, where it's like, how many devastating knee injuries can you actually sustain in your career, especially as a running back? Part of me just wants to bet on Nick Chubb returning to form in some way or another. Yeah. Maybe it won't be this year, and I don't know. It's tough, but I'm willing to bet on Nick Chubb. So yeah, I'm gonna call him a top 5. I'm gonna call him top 5. I'm sure I'll regret that, but I'm gonna call him top 5.
I mean, I would tend to agree. So,
all right, we're gonna move on to the Baltimore Ravens, last team in this division, first place team in this division. So, if I'm gonna steal someone else's question and apply it to this one. If the Ravens don't win the AFC, do they move on from John Harbaugh?
Oh my gosh. The rumblings there seem a little bit bigger than the rumblings in Buffalo, because at least we've seen sustained quote-unquote success in the playoffs from Sean McDermott's team. They win a game, at least one game every single year since 2020. which is actually a fairly long streak by NFL standards. And I know it's not what all Bills fans want, but nonetheless, it is somewhat impressive. Like John Harbaugh, that team has struggled so much in the playoffs that they're going to have issues with maintaining him, and he's losing that that Super Bowl mist around him, right? Like he had some sort of protection from winning that Super Bowl. I don't even remember what year it was. I remember the power going out in that Super Bowl, though.
Yes, that was 2012.
Yeah, which was but yeah, 2012. It was over a decade ago. At some point, you need to make a change in Baltimore, and I think they're much closer than the Bills are because I think they have a lot more reasons to be closer. Regular season success will not define that franchise, and that's all they really have to stand on at this point.
Yeah. I like John Harbaugh. I like John Harbaugh a lot. But it's a lot of the same story every year for them. And a lot of it comes down to coaching for them.
Yes.
Where you look back at 2019 and how they failed. A lot of it came down to coaching. And you look back at this past year against the Chiefs, a lot of that came down to coaching. It's unfortunate, but he's a good guy, and he'd get a job pretty quickly, I think, after that. But it's tough.
All right, my question for you. Is it more likely that Lamar Jackson wins his third MVP award, or he doesn't receive a single MVP vote? And this includes every single possible vote. So there's 250 votes out there, a fifth place vote. What's more likely, third MVP or no votes at all?
I think just like statistically speaking, it would be more likely for him to not get any MVP votes. Right? If I'm going to sit here and say that Joe Burrow has potential to get a first or second place vote, then that would also, in my mind at least, mean that Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are getting votes. Potentially Aaron Rodgers is getting some votes, right? It's a lot of players, and there's always going to be some guy who's going to put, like, Bijan Robinson or something like that, or Christian McCaffrey or whatever, Brock Purdy. Like, there's a lot of players in the NFL. I just don't know how... It would be very difficult for Lamar Jackson to win back-to-back MVPs, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and
not that
could be just bias in general. Like he could go off and have an insane year, but I think some voters would be like, we can't, like the LeBron James effect almost, like we can't give him the MVP again. Like we can't do that. So I think that could play into it slightly.
He might have like the best year of his career as like a passer, but it won't be quite as exciting as a runner. And people just sort of have that bias. Like, excitement means you pay attention more. When you pay attention more, you kind of value that a little bit more. So, it's possible where he's a better overall player at the end of 2024 than he is at the end of 2023. But just doesn't get the same amount of attention. Which, that's how it goes in the NFL sometimes. Moving on to the AFC South. And we're going to start... I guess with the Tennessee Titans, that feels like an okay place to start. Do you think Will Levis is actually the future here?
No, honestly, I do not.
No, okay.
He's fun. Right. He's really, really fun. Like watching him play is like watching a young Josh Allen play, but he's still missing something. Like even when you watched a young Josh Allen play, you still saw plays where you're like, oh my gosh, if he could only just string that all together. And Will Levis has a couple of those, but they're much more muted. They're not as like, holy moly. So I think that Will Levis will be fun this year, but I think we'll probably reach the end of this year and say, Tennessee probably needs a franchise quarterback, and Will Levis is not that. So that's where I am with Will Levis right now.
That's fair. That's fair. It's hard. Here's what I think. As succinctly as possible, I think that if there's another quarterback that could be put in the Jameis tier, it would be Will Levis.
Yes, yes, that is perfect. Yeah, he is the Jameis Winston of the 2023 draft class. That's
Yeah.
100% on. All right, on the Titans, sticking kind of with the passing game, who has more receiving yards, Calvin Ridley or DeAndre Hopkins?
Calvin Ridley. Um, Calvin Ridley has had issues with consistency overall, and I think that it's possible that he disappoints in some form or another with Tennessee. And damn, part of it might just be perception, right? Because they gave him a lot of money. I remember when that came through, and I was shocked that it was the Titans who actually landed him, and then even more shocked that they paid him the amount of money that they did. But even with a somewhat disappointing, or at least inconsistent 2023, he still had 76 catches, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And he had room for a lot more. Like there were plenty of plays out there that people could point to and be like, yeah, he could have had like another 100, 200 plus yards, some more touchdowns. Like there's potential here. There's meat left on the bone for Calvin Ridley. And with that being the case, I think that there's potential for him to take on more of that. Maybe he finds some consistency in Tennessee that he didn't have in Jacksonville. And if that's the case, then yeah, I think he's beaten out DeAndre Hopkins in terms of production overall.
Fair.
Moving on to the Indianapolis Colts. Let's go. Do you feel like Anthony Richardson is that guy?
Oh, if I had to pick between Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, who I think more likely is to be that guy, it's Anthony Richardson because he's an absolute freak. Like, he's just a freak. But I need to see him throw the ball more. Like, as of right now, I literally have not seen enough to be in any way confident with it. In fact, if I had to like put a percentage on it, like, do I think Anthony Richardson will be a stud at quarterback in the NFL? I'd probably say there's like a 20% chance. And the reason I say that simply because I have no evidence to say he can consistently do this or he can consistently stay healthy. Like, if he gets hurt early this season again, the conversation's kind of over with him at that point. I don't know if we can ever trust him to stay healthy, and it'll kind of be this mysticism around him, right? Where it'll be like, well, he could be, and he could be that next quarterback that always could be, but never will be. So that's kind of where I need to see more from Anthony Richardson.
I think that's very fair, honestly.
Oh my gosh, the Colts! What a weird team. Like, all right, how about this one? Will Jonathan Taylor ever be a thing again, or is he just never going to be a thing again?
No, I think he'll be a thing. I mean, if there's another guy that could be put into that like top 5 category, if he actually returns to some measure of what he was good at, right? I think that he could be easily one of those top 5 type of running backs. I think that injuries definitely hurt him last year, obviously. I think that it's possible for him to just come back from that and really return in a way that, like, because on the one hand, like, Jonathan Taylor, I don't think was even healthy for those first couple of Anthony Richardson games, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong.
You're right. Yeah, I'll look it up.
But having those two guys play together just sounds like a absolute nightmare. And that's not even factoring other guys like Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs, both of whom I think very, very highly of. So there's potential where all of these guys being healthy and together for this offense will just open things up even more, especially for a really creative play designer and play caller like Shane Steichen.
And he did not play those first 4 weeks, so yeah. So it's gonna be a fun, weird team to watch this year.
I wholeheartedly agree. Moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Uber, why do you hate Trevor? No, I'm kidding. That's not going to be my question because that's gonna take like the rest of the hour between the two of us. Okay, let's go with this. Part of the reason why the Jags collapsed last year is because their defense went from being very good to very bad seemingly overnight, to the point where they made a coaching change on that side of the ball and brought in former Falcons defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen. Do you feel like the Jags defense will be better this year than it was last year?
I genuinely don't like the players on their defense all that much. Josh Allen, I love. I think Josh Allen's an absolute superstar. Forsade Oluokun, I think I said that correctly, is a tackle machine every single season, so he's fun to watch. After that, though, like Trevon Walker, I think he's got some potential, but like right now, at least listed on their depth chart, Ronald Darby is their starting corner. That doesn't really excite me. And then there's really nothing else on this team. Like Darnell Savage could be interesting. Eric Armstead was like a big signing for them, but also like is aged a little. There's so many question marks there, and the talent seems so dispersed. It's not consistent talent throughout the defense. It's here's an elite player, here's an elite player. I don't know if I can trust them all that well, to a point where, like, looking at this team, there's a legitimate chance that they could finish last in the AFC South. I'm not going to pick that, but they could in theory, because that defense is a little sketchy and that offense just seemingly can never play well in big games because of a certain reason. But, all right. I mean, this is kind of unfair, but I have to go this way too. Does Gabe Davis have a better season with the Jaguars than he ever had with the Buffalo Bills?
Nah. I think he'll be good for them, but like I think that they will want. First of all, I think they'll want to get Brian Thomas Jr. involved. Whether or not he does is a different story, and I like Brian Thomas Jr. a lot, but it's possible where he just struggles to catch on early. And regardless of either of those two, I think that Christian Kirk is still Trevor Lawrence's favorite target and has been for the last couple of years. And Christian Kirk has been a good player for them when he's healthy. And so if Christian Kirk is healthy, I think that he'll remain one of those targets. Evan Ingram is still on that team, and he gets a ton of targets. So Gabe Davis kind of fitting into that plan, I can't imagine. I mean, his best season with Buffalo,
700 yards, I think,
700 or 800, right? Something like that. Let's see specifically. Yeah. So in 2022, he had 48 catches, which was a career high, for 836 yards and 7 touchdowns. Okay. I think that that's possible for him to have a pretty similar stat line. So, yeah, I don't necessarily see him exceeding that unless, let's say, Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram gets hurt and they just really start forcing Gabe Davis the ball. And I think that Gabe Davis has the ability to come up and be more productive, right? But if he's just given more volume of opportunities, but it's also possible where he just has basically the same sort of seasons that he's had in Buffalo. So,
honestly, he could legitimately finish 5th in targets if ETN, Kirk, Thomas, and Ingram both have the seasons that they kind of should have. It wouldn't be wild to see Gabe finish 5th. I don't think he'll finish 5th, but like that's a possibility. So,
I agree. Moving on to the Houston Texans, who won this division last year, which was a big surprise. I don't think anybody was really anticipating. I feel like people, at least for me, my perspective was if D'Amico Ryans wins 6 games with this team, he should be given a new contract immediately. Instead, they won the division and won a playoff game against a good Cleveland team, too. So, with that being said, how much do you feel like the Texans are going to be better this year?
I honestly do not think that they'll be better from a win-loss perspective. Maybe they'll finish 10-7. So I think they're being really overrated at this point. And honestly, it comes from the talent they brought in. Like, they brought in a lot of really, really good players, but players with question marks or players that had been great at one point and are starting to slightly decline. I'm not saying that Stephon Diggs is a player that sucks now. He's still a very, very good wide receiver, but I don't think he's going to be the Stephon Diggs we saw during his prime with Buffalo. That's the same with Joe Mixon as well. Like Joe Mixon in his prime was a really, really good running back for the Bengals. That Joe Mixon doesn't exist anymore. So you keep going through their roster and you see a ton of talent. Daniil Hunter is also a really, really good player. Honestly, of Mixon, Diggs, and Hunter, I'd probably trust Hunter the most out of the three to maintain elite level play. But I just wonder now, playing a first place schedule, not a last place schedule, how much they can compete with the big dogs in the NFL. And last year, in their final game of the season, we saw them kind of get stomped by the Ravens, which is a step up in class. Can CJ Stroud continue to improve, especially outdoors? If he can do that, then maybe they take another step forward. But at this point, they're young, they're fun, but there is some question marks there that I don't think maybe the national media is accounting for.
I tend to agree, and people got very into Bobby Slovic last year as an offensive coordinator, and I think that CJ Stroud kind of covered up some of the inefficiencies that Slovic has as a play caller. So it's possible where that kind of comes back down to earth for them.
Yeah. I'll kind of stay on that whole pass catcher idea too. Stephon Diggs, and I think my theme is essentially, let's talk about Bills players that once were and no longer are. Stephon Diggs, do we see any rumblings in Houston at any point this season? Not next season, because he's not even going to be on the team next season, but this season where it's the Diggs thing's just not working out in Houston.
Nah. I think it's going to be because he knows he's only going to be there for 1 year. I think that this is a 1 year rental, and if he wins a big game, if somehow the Texans make it all the way to the Super Bowl and he wins or something like that, he'll be like, cool, I get tons of money now, I got a Super Bowl, and now I get to play with my brother in Dallas. That's super cool. But I don't think that it will ever get to a point where things will deteriorate at that point. I don't think it'll deteriorate that quickly. I think he'll be one and done, and unless Houston really gives him a lot of money that he just cannot deny, I think that he'll be one and done, and I doubt that any issues will come from that this year. So
I actually agree with that. The only way I think you start to really see the rumblings is if Houston gets off to a rough start and Diggs isn't getting fed enough for Diggs. If that's the case, you might start to see him trying to make his way to Dallas mid-season. I doubt that happens, but I can see a path where that happens.
That's fair. Moving on to the AFC West. Let's start at the top instead. Let's start with the Chiefs. Did they do enough offensively to help Patrick Mahomes?
I mean, they could have done nothing and basically traded every single player, and I think they've done enough to help Patrick Mahomes because he continues to prove that he's still Patrick Mahomes regardless of who you put around him. That being said, he didn't have a good regular season. I think that is something that just kind of gets washed over with the way their season ended. He was average during the regular season and at points kind of struggled, and then the postseason hit and all of his players started catching the ball and he started doing Patrick Mahomes things, and people just were like, yep, that's Patrick Mahomes, give him his third ring and we'll be on with it. But I think that they'll be fine this year on offense. I think they'll yet again struggle during the regular season at points, but when it comes playoff time, which they will make the playoffs because that division is a disaster, it's going to be him chasing ring number 4, which just pisses me off to no end.
Yeah.
Will the Bills regret allowing the Chiefs to draft the great and the future Hall of Famer, Xavier Worthy?
No. Xavier Worthy might be a good player. It's certainly possible that he's not, given sort of his size and build and all that sort of stuff. Very, very fast player. If there's a place he could succeed, Kansas City would probably be that place. So it's possible he doesn't, because there's been guys who go to Kansas City, like Kadarius Toney, who they gave a 3rd-round pick for, who don't succeed there, right? just going to Kansas City and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes doesn't automatically guarantee that you'll be the best player ever or that you'll have a career year. You know, MVS is another great example of that, where he had an okay year with them in 2022, but in 2023 he struggled until they got into the playoffs. And so, do I really think the Bills will regret that? Probably not. I think they'll be fine. Yeah. Moving on to... Oh, God. These three other teams are really brutal, aren't they? Let's go with the Raiders, because I have a fun question for you about the Raiders. If the Dolphins fail to give Tua Tagovailoa an extension in 2024, do the Raiders try to pay Tua for 2025 and beyond?
So this comes from a tweet that I had, I think a week or two ago. Yes,
that's correct.
No, they don't pay him because I don't think that they want a player with the ceiling that Tua has. So I think that they go to the draft. That's what they're going to look. They're going to look for a rookie quarterback that they can draft and they can develop and make into a superstar, as opposed to signing somebody like Tua, who is reminiscent of another quarterback that they paid and brought in and was very average for them, named Mr. Jimmy Garoppolo. So that is my main
I thought you were
reason.
saying Derek Carr.
No. Jimmy Garoppolo playing in the Shanahan offense was very good. Then he went to Vegas and was not very good. That's my main reason, Jimmy Garoppolo, that I do not think that the Raiders are going to sign on to a player like Tua.
That's interesting. It's very interesting. And a good train of logic there. I like that. Yeah. All right, what do you got?
The Raiders, because this is fun for me, and I'm actually excited to watch the Raiders this year, despite a lot of the questions on this team. Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins.
Yep.
By season's end, or even by week 4, will we be talking about them as as essentially the best defensive line because of those two players?
I think they'll be in the conversation. And actually, I'm going to go even a step further. I'm going to say this defense has potential to be like a top 10 defense.
Yes.
Like, they don't necessarily have... Like, they have Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins, who are two elite-level players for their respective positions. They have some other halfway decent players on that defense. And that defense last year played pretty well down the stretch once they fired Josh McDaniels. And I like Patrick Graham as their defensive coordinator. I think that his performance this year, if he gets them to perform at a top 10 defense type of level, there's potential for him to be in like head coaching conversations. So I think that they being Crosby and Wilkins will put the Raiders in that sort of conversation in terms of their defensive line. So
I can't wait for Patrick Mahomes to have to face Christian Wilkins and Max Crosby twice a season. Like, they are going to make his life a living hell, especially Wilkins, especially when he gets a hold of it. A part of Patrick,
or a part or two of Patrick. Moving on to the Denver Broncos. Uber. How big of a train wreck will this team actually be?
They legitimately could go 0-17. Like,
I don't know about that, but go on.
I think it was last year, right? It was last year where the Cardinals, everyone looked at the Cardinals and were like, this team's going to be really, really bad. Like, legitimately, really, really, really bad. Because they just had no talent, and Kyler Murray was hurt, and we didn't know when he was going to come back, and he came back and played relatively well. I look at this team, I'm like, what is the expectation here? Like, how are they going to score? The defense isn't very good. They have like one, I guess, blue chip player on the entire roster in Pat Surtain. Other than that, their offensive line is decent. Their pass catchers are and their quarterback is Jarrett Stidham, Bo Nix, or Zach Wilson. Like, Javonte Williams, a nice piece. This is a really, really, really bad football team. I think that I would never bet a team to go 0-17. Actually, I honestly might place a bet on this team to go 0-17. But in that division, they'll probably steal one from like the Chargers or something. So they're going to be bad. I don't think they win 3 games. I think they win 1 or 2 games.
Wow. Yikes. Brutal.
Yeah. All right, from my end, who starts at quarterback the most this season for them?
Oh, Bo Nix.
Okay.
I mean, you can't take this guy 12th overall and try and give more starts to Jarrett frickin' Stidham. It's just
another team took a quarterback higher that probably isn't going to start him all that much.
Totally different scenario.
Yes.
Totally different scenarios.
I agree. Yeah.
But yes, I mean, here's the thing. I actually don't hate Bo Nix. I liked him enough as a prospect where I thought, like, okay, maybe he can sort of put himself in a position where he's kind of like a Baker Mayfield plus, potentially, right? But that's not who I would take 12th overall in the NFL draft. And it's definitely not somebody that I feel comfortable putting into this position with this roster being the way that it is. And you bring up the offensive line being okay. I agree. I think that they are okay, which is not where you want to be when you're paying that offensive line the amount of money that they're paying them. Because they gave Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers a boatload and a half of money last year, and this offensive line is okay now. And they lost Lloyd Cushenberry to the Titans. And, Lloyd Cushenberry was a good, not great center who might be better in Tennessee because he gets to be with Bill Callahan now. So I think that this it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky for the Broncos. It's going to be tricky for Bo Nix to be successful, I think. And Sean Payton after this year might just be like, you know what? I don't really have to do this. I don't have to keep doing this. I can get another analyst job at Fox. They'll love me. They'll have me back. See ya.
He was a robot. He was an absolute robot.
Moving on to the Chargers. And how many... If I'm going to set the over-under at 500, let's say, are you taking the over on rushing attempts or under?
So my question is going to be similar, but I won't. I'll wait till the end of this spiel here. Over 500 rushing attempts. Oh my God, that is so many rushing attempts.
It's a lot of rushing attempts.
To be fair, just looking at it, the Bills had 512 last season.
Oh, they did?
But Josh Allen had 111 of those. So.
Ooh, okay. All right. I'm still going to go with 500 then.
I think they have over 500 rushing attempts. That, Greg Roman is going to make people forget that Justin Herbert has elite ability as a quarterback because he's just never going to be allowed to throw the football. That team, as much as I'm excited to watch the Raiders play and with all of their major issues in Las Vegas, I'm not excited in the least to watch the Chargers. I do not want to watch this team play football at all.
The only thing I want to watch is Lad McConkey because if Justin Herbert will throw in a game, it'll be to Lad McConkey, and he'll get every single target on this team, I think.
So I'm going to change my question. I'll quickly tell you what my question was going to be. My question was going to be, does Justin Herbert have more passing attempts than the Chargers have rushing attempts? But we'll move past that.
The answer is no, by the way.
Yeah. Lad McConkey. Does he have more receptions this year than Marvin Harrison?
No. I don't think so. And I say that because I really think Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be like a player that we just is going to pop onto the scene and be like borderline elite almost immediately. Like, he will have a Puka Nacua type of season, I think. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is that special. And I like Lad McConkey a lot, and I think that he will be a major target for Justin Herbert throughout this season, but I think that there is potential where he just struggles because the passing offense won't be super creative, and it's going to ask him to do a lot of things. And that's a lot to put on a single rookie who, I liked a lot coming into this draft. But If he's your only guy, that's a tough sell. That's tricky. So, moving on to the NFC. We might have to move slightly quickly, but that's okay. We'll manage it.
Yeah.
We'll start with the Washington Commanders. Is Dan... I don't even know if this is necessarily a Washington Commanders question so much as it is just a question about this division as a whole. Is Dan Quinn the only one whose seat is, like, safe right now in terms of head coaches in the NFC East?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have never even thought to ask that, nor have I even thought about this. The other three coaches all could be fired by the end of this season, even if one of them makes the playoffs. Like, if the Cowboys make the playoffs and lose in the first round again, they're going to fire their coach. If the Eagles don't make the playoffs, and or if they do, but there's all this inner turmoil, Sirianni will get fired. If the Giants suck, which they're going to suck, then Brian Daboll's going to get fired, and Joe Shane's going to get fired too, by the way. But Dan Quinn probably not going to get fired. I don't think that team is going to be very good, though, which will be interesting. Like, they probably have to win 5 games to assure that his seat is not taken out from under.
I think that's possible. They won how many games last year with
4?
Yeah, 5 is certainly possible.
Yeah.
Like, Ron Rivera was not helping that team as much as he needed to. And Dan Quinn, I don't think, like, super highly of Dan Quinn as, like, a head coach in terms of, like, what you can do with him. But he'll get that team to more than 5 wins. I believe that. Yeah, what do you got for me?
I will say this. The Commanders might be the most nothing team in the NFL to me, to a point where, like, I'm wondering, I had to, like, look at their depth chart to see what question I would even ask. I'll say this: their defense looks fun. Sure. If you had to put the ceiling on that defense, where at the end of the season, top 16, top 10, like, do you have a place where you think they could fit? And I'll just throw some names out just so you have them, because I didn't know they were on there. Dante Fowler, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, Bobby Wagner, Jeremy Chin, or just a few of the players on that defense. So a solid group of people in different, areas of the field.
I'd probably say, like, top 15. I think that it'll look a lot like what Dallas has been doing for the last couple of years with Dan Quinn defensively, which is very positionless and kind of geared more to defend the pass. But and they'll have some successful games probably early on, but I think that honestly, like, a lot of the success that Dan Quinn had in Dallas was kind of built on 2 things. One was Micah Parsons being a freak, which he is, and the other being super opportunistic corners in Deron Bland and Trayvon Diggs that he just doesn't have in Washington. He doesn't have either of those things. He still has a good group of players, like you just said. I don't know if Bobby Wagner fits into that group at this point in his career, but regardless,
Wasn't he an All-Pro last year too?
He was a Pro Bowler.
No, second team All-Pro last year.
He was second team All-Pro? Oh, God.
The AP is a disaster, but anyway.
That's ugly. That's rough. Anyway, God, now I'm just going to be mad thinking about that the rest of the night. Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, and even guys like Dante Fowler, Jeremy Chin, Dorrance Armstrong, right? Like, all those guys, I think, will give them enough juice, and I think that he is a good enough defensive mind where they won't be necessarily amazing, but I do think they'll be in the top half of defenses.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the New York Football Giants. God, can they cut Daniel Jones after this year? Before I ask this question, can they cut Daniel Jones in 2025?
I think they have an out. Yeah, I think they have an out.
So,
I'm checking that.
Yeah, we'll have our producer double check that. Assuming that that's the case.
They have an out next year. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So, do they get rid of Daniel Jones after 2024?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it was you that said, "Oh yeah, when we were doing the quarterback show, you're like, Drew Lock's going to start over Daniel Jones." I think you said that, or you think
I said it's possible.
It's possible
they'll compete.
Drew Lock's got like a lot more swagger to him that I think this Giants team needs, because I
That's
don't
not
think
saying much.
I know, but they have nothing. Malik Neighbors could be really, really good, but
Sure.
other than that, like, you still have to get somebody to get them the ball. And like Drew Lock had that one really fun game in Seattle, and maybe that forces him into that role. But yeah, Daniel Jones, dude, I will never forgive Joe Shane for giving him that contract, to a point where I despise the Giants almost more than any other team in the NFL. There's a couple ahead of them. But signing Daniel Jones to that contract was such a disaster, and I'm mad that a person from Buffalo did such a stupid thing.
That's fair. That's fair, dog.
All right. I'm going to go this way. Devin Singletary and Malik Neighbors, who has more yards this season?
Probably Devin Singletary.
Oh, my God.
I think, here's the thing. I think Malik Neighbors was a good pick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there is a reasonable chance that he will be successful in the NFL. I think there's also a reasonable chance he struggles a lot as a rookie, because they're going to kind of rely on him to be the number one guy. And I don't know how well he's going to handle that role specifically. If there was anyone else there that could help, I'd feel differently. But unfortunately, Darren Waller retired and also released a rap song about his divorce, right?
I guess.
What a weird time to be alive, man. Yeah, I think that there's a reasonable chance that Malik Neighbors has, 750 yards and a solid season that is disappointing for some people. And Devin Singletary has maybe 1,000 yards all put together, 1,000 all-purpose yards. I think that's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Moving on to the Dallas Cowboys. Okay. I don't know, and I'm gonna look it up right now. Is it possible that this is great. So, do you think CeeDee Lamb breaks his own single season receiving record that he set last year for receptions at 122 and receiving yards at 1651? Because I can't think of anyone else that they're going to throw to on that team other than maybe Jake Ferguson.
Oh my God. I have to look at their depth chart, because now I'm trying to think who they. I mean, Brandon Cooks isn't there anymore, so it's CeeDee Lamb. Even though it still says Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, Kavonte.
Michael Gallup isn't there anymore. I don't know if Brandon Cooks is still there.
I think Brandon Cooks went somewhere else, but I think the depth chart still lists.
No, he's still with the Cowboys.
Oh, he's still with the Cowboys.
He is still with the Cowboys.
I mean, Dak's going to feed CeeDee Lamb. So, honestly, whatever his totals were last season, he's probably going to break them this season. And also, unless he gets so disgruntled because he wants to get paid, and that whole Dak CD situation where only one of them is getting paid and the other one isn't going to get paid.
Right.
So I wonder how that's all going to work out, especially, let's say hypothetically before the season starts, they extend Dak Prescott and not CD. I could see that being really, really, really bad.
That's fair. That is fair.
All right. I'm counting something quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. The Cowboys play 7 games outdoors this season.
Okay.
I'll name the teams for you, but I do want to know how many games they will win outdoors in 2024. So they play the Browns,
okay,
the Giants, the Steelers, the 49ers, the Commanders, the Panthers, and the Eagles outside.
I think they win 4 of those games.
Okay. So
I think they win 4 of those games. Yeah.
All right.
That's what I would say. And this is a team that obviously functions better indoors. I don't think they're a team that's impossible to put together outside either, right? Like, I think they'll be fine. And I think some of the games they'll be better in. But overall, I think they'll be fine. I don't think that'll be the problem for them. Let's put it that way.
There's also a lack of the ability to stop the run, but that's all another thing too. All right, your question.
Yeah, moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles. Man, so many different areas we can go with this team. Is it possible? Actually, let's put it this way. Is it likely that all three major skill players for this Eagles offense, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Saquon Barkley, all get over 1,000 yards?
Yes. Yes. I think the riskiest one there is Saquon, and I think it's just health related. Yeah. And I think Saquon will be really good on the Eagles. I still don't think we're ever going to see the Saquon Barkley that was a guaranteed first ballot Hall of Famer when he was drafted. I don't think that person really ever was going to exist after we saw him early on in his career, and then the injuries just took any of that possibility away. But he's a good running back that, to your point earlier in the show, has the upside to be a top 5 running back. And I don't think he'll ever be like CMC level. But yeah, I think 1,000 yards for each of those players is for sure possible. I do wonder how much Dallas Goedert eats into that at some point. But they have a ton of weapons. It's a embarrassment of riches for the Eagles.
That's fair.
All right. I guess this one for you as an Eagles fan, how much do you think the loss of Jason Kelce will negatively affect the Eagles in 2024? So let's say we rank it from a 1 to 5, where 1 is like it won't affect them at all, and 5 is it's going to be an absolute disaster.
I'm going to be real boring, and I'm going to say a 3.
Okay.
I think it'll matter, partially because he was such a great leader, and I think also because he was a big part of the tush push being as successful and consistent as it was. However, they've been preparing for his departure by drafting Cam Jurgens a couple years ago, who a lot of people really, really liked and can do a lot of the same sort of things that Jason Kelce does, even if he's not doing them at the same, like, Hall of Fame elite level that Jason Kelce was doing things at. I think that Cam Jurgens has potential to be a really good player, but not necessarily a Hall of Famer. And I think that there's people who will look at that and be like, wow, Cam Jurgens is just not Jason Kelce. Like, what are the Eagles going to do? It's like, yeah, he's not Jason Kelce. What do you want him to do? Because no one is. But I think that he will be a very good replacement for Jason Kelce. I think he'll be good. He'll bring a similar level of toughness and athleticism, but not at the same Jason Kelce type of level. Sure. It's just impossible. It's impossible to try and live up to that. Yeah. But I think he'll still be good. Yeah. Moving on to the NFC North. We'll start at the top with the Lions, I guess. We'll call them. They won the division, so we'll call that the top. Do they win this division again?
Yeah, they win that division, I think, pretty handedly, too. Green Bay's fun. Minnesota, I don't think is going to be great. And the Bears are too young. And I need to see Caleb Williams actually play in the NFL before I'm going to anoint him the next great quarterback as well. The Lions are literally built to beat the living snot out of you, and they're going to go and beat the living snot out of those other 3 teams in that division. I think the Lions actually win the NFC pretty easily, and they're the 1 seed going into the playoffs. I don't think that they make the Super Bowl. I think some other team will knock them off at some point, but yeah, I think the Lions kind of walk away with that division.
That's wild. I kind of like that. I like that as a take. The Lions being like consistently good would be a fun thing. It'd be a very fun thing.
Oh yeah, the Lions being good is definitely fun. Yeah. I'm going to do, again, this is kind of cheating a little bit because it's Bills related, but Sam Laporta or Dalton Kincaid, who has more receptions at the end of 2024?
Probably Kincaid, but also probably not by much.
Yeah.
I think that Laporta will have another really strong season, but I also think that they will try to incorporate Jameson Williams a bit more, and I think that they will incorporate Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more consistently because they kind of brought him along slowly throughout the beginning of the season before having him be like really fully integrated into the offense by the end of the season. So yeah, I think Laporta will have another really strong season, but I think that the situation in Buffalo kind of warrants Kincaid to get more targets. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Kincaid on that one.
I'm with you on that.
Moving on to the Green Bay Packers. A lot of receivers on this team. A lot of receivers. Who leads this team in receiving?
Oh my gosh. Jeez. Christian Watson, right? Like he had a pretty damn good year last year. And I think Watson also, he has an injury history, so that's the one
thing. He has a long injury history.
That could hold him back. The Packers are such a weird team to me, and I don't know where to buy in with them. But I do think that Christian Watson, in my opinion, would be the most talented of that bunch. So I would lean on Jordan Love to feed Christian Watson more this season.
Fair enough. What you got?
Jordan Love, or this will go back to the QB show, and I know that we picked it one way, but let's. I want to see if you change your opinion or stick with it. Jordan Love or CJ Stroud at the end of this year, who will we be saying is the better quarterback of the two?
It's a loaded question. I think that we'll be saying that Jordan Love is the better quarterback. But I think that CJ Stroud will be essentially at that same level. It's just that what Jordan Love does will be a lot more exciting, right? Like the way that he plays football is just so kind of off key and a little odd, a little strange, but it's also exciting because of that. So I think that there's a real chance that Jordan Love just shows up on everyone's highlights every single week, and people just get this perception of that, while CJ Stroud is also showing up on people's highlights. It's not quite as fun or crazy where he's doing a bunch of sidearm shots to someone, Yeah. So I'm gonna say that Jordan Love will be considered to be the better of the two quarterbacks by the end of the year.
Gotcha.
Moving on to the Chicago Bears. Lot of interesting parts and pieces to this team now. This is probably the best situation that a Chicago Bears quarterback has walked into by a pretty substantial margin, I would say. They have DJ Moore. They have Rome Odunze. They have Keenan Allen. Do you feel like all three of those receivers are going to get over 1,000 yards?
No, I don't think two of them do. I think one of them does.
You think one does?
And I'd probably I'll go DJ Moore. I wanted to say Keenan Allen, but I think his health is going to catch up to him. I only think one does. I think Caleb Williams is going to struggle at points this season just because that's what happens to rookie quarterbacks. And I know a lot of people think that he's going to win 7 MVP awards and 10 Super Bowls, which just blows my mind. I'm not going to buy into the Caleb Williams hype until I legitimately see him play against an NFL roster. And honestly, the handful of games I watched of Caleb Williams play in college, which admittedly weren't his best games because they were against very good teams that were better than that USC team he was on. Every single time I watched him, I was like, okay, this is the guy. This is the guy that I'm supposed to be ooh, oh my gosh, he's so good. And I never felt that way. He could completely prove me wrong. Maybe he will. I bet he doesn't. And to that point, I'll say this, and this will go into my question. I've
Okay.
been told that Trevor Lawrence was a generational talent. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. I've been told now that Caleb Williams is a generational talent, even though they're
Mm-hmm.
in the same generation. So that makes no sense to me.
It's crazy.
Who's the next generational prospect in college right now that 2 years from now I have to hear people say, he's generational, he can't miss, he's going to be the greatest quarterback ever?
I don't know because this next crop of quarterbacks is not great from
Mm.
what I have heard. Um, Plus, the college game is changing so much. The whole landscape of college football is becoming so strange and distorted and bad, honestly. So it's hard to say. If I were a betting person, whoever is at USC with Cliff, or not with Cliff Kingsbury, but with Lincoln Riley, because between Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams now, he's gotten quite a few guys paid a lot of money. So yeah, that would be my betting money. But
I'm excited.
we'll see.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Moving on to the Minnesota Vikings. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings defense basically functioned in two forms. They either dropped 8 or they blitzed heavy. Do you feel that with the additions they've made to that defense that they will also be vying for a top 10 type of defensive season?
I mean, they better, because if they don't, they're going to have a really rough season. There's some like Jonathan Greenard who came over from Houston. So they basically swapped Greenard with Hunter, which is interesting. I like Greenard a lot. He was very good for Houston last season. And they also got Andrew Van Ginkel from the Dolphins, who admittedly isn't a great player, but he's a feisty pass rusher at times. So I think that, would you say top 15?
Top 10.
Top 10? Oh, no, I don't think they're going to be top 10. I think top half they could sit in, but I think that there's some questions there. And the fact that Harrison Smith is still playing is kind of mind-boggling to me. I think he was decent last year. I don't even actually remember his season. But, yeah, no, I don't think top 10's in their wheelhouse this season, especially because I think they're going to be put in very disadvantageous situations because of that offense.
I think that's fair.
All right. So Sam Darnold's at another stop in his career where people say, well, maybe Sam Darnold could be a thing. In fact, the Vikings signed him to a 1-year contract where they're paying him $5 million this year. He won't be on the team next year, though they'll be paying him $5 million next year as well, by the way. And then in 2026, they're paying him 1.2. In 2027, they're paying him 1.2. And in 2028, they're paying him 1.2 as well. So he's paid for 5 years. Who's the next team that's going to think Sam Darnold could actually be a starting quarterback in the NFL?
Las Vegas Raiders. Next.
I like it. I like it.
Actually, no. You know what? I'm not gonna say the Raiders because I do believe that the Raiders will pay Tua, despite your actually genuinely smart argument against that. I think a team that's going to take a chance on Sam Darnold is either gonna be New Orleans, or wait for it, Cleveland.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Imagine if Cleveland signs Sam Darnold after they drafted Baker Mayfield first overall in that same draft.
It'd be glorious.
That would be there's got to be some sort of German word for that, right? Some sort of German phrase for that sort of feeling. It's got to be
Schadenfreude. Yes.
Sure. All right, moving on to the next division, the NFC South, which is a division of professional football teams. Let's start at the bottom with the Carolina Panthers. So the Carolina Panthers won 2 games last year? 3 games?
Yeah, 2-15.
2-15. Do they pass the 6-win mark?
No way.
No?
They're terrible. They're terrible. They do not pay. No, 6 wins? I think you doubled the line that I would put them at, which I'd put them at around 3. This team is so freaking bad. And in large part, they're bad because Bryce Young is not a good starting quarterback, and he'll never be a good starting quarterback, in my opinion. In fact, the best quarterback on their team might be Andy Dalton.
Might be.
If he
had the best actual individual game as a quarterback last year for that team.
Yeah, he's no, I don't think that they're winning 6 games, nor do I think they're getting remotely close to 6 games. All right. Do the Panthers draft a quarterback next year in the first round?
Probably not. I think they will ride out Bryce Young for however long they can. Likely largely because of Dave Tepper being the one who seems to be in love with him. And when you're an owner who's that involved, it doesn't really matter who else you hire. You're going to be that guy. You're going to be that guy. And you're going to be that guy until the owner says you're not that guy. It sucks. And to address Mike Malley Guitar here, boy, did they flub the dub with Bryce Young. What the fuck was Reich thinking? I think he was thinking, I'm going to try my best with the hand that's been dealt to me. Because all of the reporting seemed to be that coaching staff really liked C.J. Stroud. But that the owner, Dave Tepper, really liked Bryce Young. And that's the direction they went. It's hard to get past that. For the record, I think they will be closer to like 4 or 5 wins as a team. Because I like the additions they made to their roster overall. Bryce Young may still be a problem, but I don't think they'll be quite so outright pathetic like they were last year. So, moving on to the New Orleans Saints. Is this the year they finally bottom out and actually start rebuilding their franchise instead of trying desperately to be slightly relevant in people's minds?
I legitimately don't know how they rebuild their franchise. Like, they need to essentially get demoted out of the NFL so that they can recoup all their cap somehow. They are in such a disastrous situation that no matter what they do, they are screwed. I just pulled up their cap space for next season. They have they're $100 million over the cap next year.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, they could bottom out this year, but they had to. The bottom out will happen next year if that's the case. So if they're bad this season, then next season they're going to have to cut literally everybody from this roster and pay players only vet minimums. And they might even have to trade draft picks because they're incapable of paying their draft picks. Like, this is the worst cap situation probably in NFL. Actually, it is the worst cap situation in NFL history. So any bottoming out that could happen this year is postponed to next year because they still are trying to make themselves a thing at this point.
They're a mess.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't need. The thing is, I have been on this Saints at points and thinking that they could be somewhat decent, and I've been wrong so many times. They have any I guess give me a 1 to 10. 10 being yes, guaranteed. 1 being no way in hell they win that division.
No way in hell. It's not happening. Just I don't think much of that division. I don't think much of most of the teams in that division. I think the Falcons probably win that division. If they don't, it'll be the Bucks somehow who do it for like a 5th straight year, which is so weird when you look at the history of that division. But yeah, it's a bad team. They don't have enough talent. A lot of their good talent is aging. And you still have Derek Carr at quarterback, so good luck. Have fun with that. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Do they win this division for a 5th straight year? Somehow?
No, because I'm with you. Atlanta seems like the class of this division.
Yeah.
Very, very, like, their roster is good enough to a point where, like, I'd be worried about them if I was a fan of an NFC team. Like, they could go into the playoffs and maybe sneak out. I don't think they're going to compete with a team like the Lions, but I think that they could sneak up on someone early in the playoffs, especially with home field advantage, which will be beneficial to them.
Sure.
So I think Atlanta wins pretty easily. I don't think the Bucs are in that, in that same tier as Atlanta.
Fair enough.
For the Bucs, will they regret signing Baker Mayfield?
No. Not even because I think he'll be, like, good for them, but just because the money wasn't so astronomical that it'll actually cripple them.
Yeah.
I think what they gave him was reasonable, and I think what they'll get out of him will probably be reasonable, because they still have good players like Mike Evans, and they drafted Jalen McMillan, and they have Chris Godwin. So I think they'll be fine. Even if I don't think very highly of their new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, especially in comparison to someone who I think was really good in Dave Canales, I do think that they'll be fine. They won't be amazing. They'll be a very average kind of ho-hum type of team. And sometimes that's all you need to be. And they won't necessarily regret the contract they gave him, because at the end of the day, they just didn't really have many other options. There wasn't some other great veteran unless they were in the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes, and they weren't in a position to draft someone. So, yeah, take your medicine. Don't cripple yourself too badly, and they'll be fine.
Yep.
All right, moving on to the Atlanta Falcons. You already gave kind of a hot take on them. I feel like that they could be a spicy team in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Is it possible that this team goes to the NFC Championship?
Oh my goodness.
Do you feel like that's within the, like, a reasonable, like, obviously anything is possible. Do you feel like that's a reasonable thing that could happen in the reality that we live in?
I will say yes, because I think the seeding could fall in their favor because of the division they play in. So I think San Francisco's record might be worse than Atlanta's record, just because I like San Francisco's division better than Atlanta. So if Atlanta somehow sneaks above them and can bypass them, like if they can somehow group San Francisco to have to go play Detroit, and those two beat up on each other, and Atlanta kind of sneaks past them into that NFC Championship by beating a team like the Cowboys or the Eagles or the Packers, I think Atlanta could make it. I wouldn't pick them to make it. I think they win one playoff game and that's it. They're done, because I think they're running into one of those two teams in the 49ers and Lions. I don't think they can beat either of them.
Adam Luloff says we should have drafted Cousins. Like back in 2012 when he was a 4th round pick? Because I agree with that.
Yeah.
That would have been great. That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know what this means for right now, though. But I appreciate the comment, though. I appreciate it. All right.
Speaking of drafted quarterbacks, does Michael Penix have over 100 passing attempts this season?
No. I think he'll play in a couple of games. I don't think it'll be a lot. It'll probably look something similar to like Patrick Mahomes' rookie year, where he sat behind Alex Smith, and he had one game that he started at the end of the year against the Broncos and won, and kind of showed little flashes here and there of what Patrick Mahomes would end up being. But I don't think he'll have over 100 passing attempts. I think that Cousins will be fine and good to go, and he'll be. I don't think Cousins is going to underperform necessarily. So, moving on to our final division, we're going to start at the top. We're going to start with the 49ers. A lot of heartbreak for the 49ers over the last 5 years. NFC championships and Super Bowls have been lost for this team. Is this the year the Niners actually do it and win a Super Bowl for Kyle Shanahan?
No. And I feel like I'm becoming more of a vibes guy as I get older, and I don't know why. I feel like that's supposed to be something you are when you're younger, but there's bad vibes in San Francisco right now. And for that reason, I think that they're going to stumble, much like I think that's one of the impetuses for the Bengals' impending struggles is that there's bad vibes in Cincinnati. So with bad vibes in San Francisco, I think that you start to see the downfall of the great Brock Purdy. I think you see Debo start to regress as he's also aging and the hits are piling up. And I think I don't even know if you see Brandon Ayuk show up, to be honest, at this point.
Who knows?
So, yeah, I don't think that this is the year. I think that Kyle Shanahan is one of those guys that just will never win the Super Bowl.
That's fair. What do you got for me?
I mean, the 49ers, they're such a damn good team. Christian McCaffrey, did he make it through the entire season healthy?
I think so. Since he's gotten to San Francisco, he's actually been very healthy throughout his time there, which is interesting because San Francisco has, like, under Kyle Shanahan, not been good in terms of injury luck. I don't know if it's just the style of offense that they play or whatever, but they've just had really bad injury luck. But CMC has been healthy since he's gotten there, so I'm inclined to say that he'll stay healthy and he'll have another great season. And God, I really love Christian McCaffrey.
And no Madden curse. No Madden curse.
That's true. No. Not at all. All right, moving on to the Los Angeles Rams. Do they finish second place in this division again?
No. I have a team that I think is going to finish second in the
all right. We might be on the same wavelength then. All right, go on.
I'm interested.
Wait, we'll reveal that part of it later. I
just revealed.
I know you did, but we're going to reveal that later.
Okay, we'll talk about it later. So anyway, I don't think the Rams finished second in the division. In fact, I think the Rams also missed the playoffs as well. I think last year was really, really fun with them, but I think it was, to an extent, a flash in the pan, and I think they have a lot of work they have to go through here in the near future. Like, I think Matthew Stafford's not long for the NFL at this point. Their backup, Jimmy Garoppolo, also just got suspended, which is kind of funny. And then the rest of that team is fun, but like Puka Nacua is becoming the wide receiver one, and Cooper Kupp's getting old. Like, they're just at a weird point where all of their great players, Stafford, Kupp, and Aaron Donald, now no longer there, are either old or gone, and I don't know if they can hang on. And Trey White being there is awesome, but at the same time, like, what is he now after suffering that injury? So no, I don't think they finish second in the division.
That's fair.
How much, as a Bills fan, am I going to be upset that the Rams drafted Kyle Williams light Braden Fisk?
Probably pretty strongly, because I think that he's going to be really, really good.
God.
It may not be great, like, right out of the gate, because they're having a new defensive coordinator come in to replace Raheem Morris, and I think that is a really big deal that they lost Raheem Morris. But getting Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, both of whom are great, and both of whom played together at Florida State, I think that they will be staples for that team for a long, long time. So, moving on to the Seattle Seahawks. They seem like the last place team in this division, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very much. Like, I think, like, Geno is a fun quarterback and, like, his story's fun and all that, but like,
we may have lost Uber here. Just to kind of spin off of what he said, though. Like, I agree. Geno is a fun quarterback. I like his story, and I think that there are some really good things that he does. I think there are times where he has genuinely great games, but I do think that there is a certain ceiling on him as a quarterback and how he can perform. We're going to bring Uber back in. Welcome back to the show. Hang on. Whatever. We switched sides. Whatever.
Yeah,
wait, hold on. I can do this here. There we go. All right, now we're good. Geno, go on.
Yeah, Geno's a fun quarterback. His story's fun, but I don't think he's much of anything, like, to really write home about. So as far as the Seahawks go, like, they'll be fine, but they're not going to be good enough to finish better than third in this division, and I have them finishing last.
That's fair. What do you got?
I honestly don't even know where to be. Oh, so Pete Carroll, now no longer with Seattle. replaced by Todd Monken, right?
Mike McDonald.
Mike McDonald, jeez. Mike McDonald.
Wrong Ravens coordinator.
Do you think that that's an improvement at head coach in year one?
In year one, no. Overall, yeah. Because I think he'll bring a lot of the same overall qualities and vibes, since we're talking about vibes a lot tonight. I think he'll bring a lot of those things while being a bit more modern and a bit more forward-thinking with certain things that Pete was just a little too far behind on. And I love Pete Carroll, and I love all the stuff that he brought to the NFL. I think that they have a bright future ahead of them, but I don't think 2024 is going to be their year. So, all right, last team. But are the Arizona Cardinals going to be last in this division, Uber?
No, and they're going to make the playoffs too.
Let's do it!
I literally, since our quarterback show, I've been thinking about this. Like that, this is what created this for me. I don't like Kyler Murray, the person per se, or like he's talking about vibes. I don't like his vibes.
But that's fair.
He can be a good quarterback, and he can be a really, really dangerous quarterback.
Yep.
In fact, maybe this is a really, really hot take. You want a dark horse MVP candidate? Put your money on Kyler Murray. I think that this team is going to sneak up on a lot of people, and I sure as hell hope it's not the Bills in Week 1. I think the Cardinals are going to be pretty damn good. I'm going to ask you kind of the same question here. I know it's a little bit cheating here, but
that's fine.
Cardinals, do they make the playoffs?
I think they do make the playoffs, and I think they may even they might be like a 7 seed type team, right? It may be just like a little push at the end where they might get a little bit of luck here and there and end up at the playoffs. But I really like Kyler Murray. I like him in this offense. I love Marvin Harrison Jr. Like I said earlier, I think he could have like a Puka Nacua type of season in year one. I think that Trey McBride is about to have a breakout season at tight end as well. I think if you are following Anthony Prohaska, and if you're not, why? Why are you not following Anthony Prohaska? Go follow Anthony Prohaska right now at @pro_ant, I believe is his @ or something like that. He has been all in on the Cardinals' rushing attack because that rushing attack was really good last year. And you combine that, as just the tip of Canoe says, with Trey Benson and James Conner, who was really good last year. Trey Benson as another guy to kind of help this rushing team. A healthy Kyler Murray with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. And you even add guys like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch as 2 and 3 options for the offense at wide receiver. This could be really good. This could be a really good offense. And the defense with Jonathan Gannon. I think that Jonathan Gannon gets overhated, and I think that he's a really smart coach. And even if his defense is kind of simple in terms of how it's run philosophically, I think it's still a good, there's still potential for that defense to be good enough. And I think that he is a good leader, and I think that that team should have been way worse than it actually was last year. And the fact that they weren't is a testament to him and the staff that he put together. That is going to be it for us. We are going to wrap things up right now because we are about to bleed into the air raid hours time, and we do not want to do that. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We are dedicating this episode in particular to the Around the NFL podcast, now finished after 11 years. Thank you, heroes. Ralph Wilson Sr. gets it. This is... I don't know if you were around the NFL person or not, but I was, and this is definitely a reference to that. So thank you for that. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Shout out to Dan Hanzus, Marc Sessler, the late Chris Wesseling, and Gregg Rosenthal for all the work they did over the last 11 years in helping to grow that particular platform to what it was. Super grateful to all of you for joining us. If you like this video and all the stuff that we did tonight, leave a like on your way out. If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to Cover One Fantasy, subscribe to Cover One College Football. All great channels, all with great content creators. We've got all sorts of shows throughout the week. We have one coming up in about a minute and a half, and we've got all sorts of written content that we're also partnering with Buffalo Bills Sports Illustrated with as well. I just had my piece. Uber, I believe you've written one, maybe not yet, but that's soon. others like Greg Vorse and Kyle Salagi and Chris Seth. That's the other guy who I love. He's great. And we're all going to be contributing with them throughout the season. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter, always drunk, always tweeting nonsense.
You can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. Folks, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. If you are wanting to support us even further than just subscribing and liking and all that fun stuff, please go consider OnePass, our direct subscription, $60 a year. Great price, great value for what you're getting, and you get to interact with us in our Discord. It's a lot of fun. We will see you all next week. Thank you all so much for joining us on this very long stream. We're going to leave now. Bye-bye.